Before that, on BBC One, Patrick Moore enjoys the skies in the Caribbean.
I'm about to go on board the Greek Ship Stella Solaris, which is going to take me and 900 other people out into the Caribbean to observe a total eclipse of the sun. I'll tell you more about it when we're at sea. An eclipse of the sun occurs when the moon passes in front of the sun and blocks it out for a few minutes. The trouble is, you've got to be in just the right place at just the right time, but the track of totality is very narrow. During totality, you can see the sun's atmosphere. This is a picture I took at the eclipse in Mexico of 1991. It's not only a marvelous sight, but you can make observations that can't be carried out properly at any other time. This time, the eclipse begins in the Pacific and crosses land only briefly before crossing into the Atlantic. In Britain, we've got to wait until next year. So now we're steaming to our position of 12 degrees, 36 minutes north, longitude 69 degrees west. The expedition has been organised by Ted Pettis. Ted, what gave you the idea of observing eclipses from the sea?
Well, Patrick, I saw my first eclipse in 1963, and I just got hooked. In 1970, there was a total eclipse visible in the eastern part of the United States, and among other places, a place called Eclipse, Virginia. And I thought, how wonderful to go to Eclipse, Virginia to see totality. And I went, along with my sister, Marcy Sigler, to the city fathers of Eclipse, Virginia, and we talked them into doing a festival. Well, a few months before the eclipse, they reneged on us because they thought that we would bring all kinds of hippies and beer drinkers, and they remembered Woodstock very, very vividly, and they canceled on us. And on my way home, I was very dejected and decided that I should look at something more serious. And when I looked at the 1972 eclipse, I saw it was mainly visible over water. And on land, it was very, very limited. The cloud conditions were very severe, and I thought, why not go to a shipping company and get a ship and go out? And that's how the whole concept was born.
What would you say are the main advantages of observing eclipses from ships?
Well, the main advantage is that we have the maneuverability. A ship we can just pick up and go very, very quickly, and with today's space-age technology, weather information.
Everyone's here to watch the eclipse. How are you going to cope with 900 people on deck all at the same time?
Well, what we do on Eclipse Day, we're going to take off all the chairs, pick up the lounge chairs, give everybody plenty of room. I think the camaraderie, the eclipse itself will bring people together into one big family, waiting for the eclipse and then the big celebration and the raising of the flag afterwards.
Are you satisfied that all the passengers are well prepared?
We've sent them a great deal of literature ahead of time, and we've prepared a great deal of information for them on board, and we've put together a wonderful assembly of experts like yourself, and I think that they're probably the best prepared passengers in the world.
In the sky at night. So here's the grand tour of the universe with Patrick Moore.
Nowadays, we know how eclipses occur because we know how the sun, the earth, and the moon move. The ancients didn't. I mean, for example, the Chinese were inclined to think that the eclipsed sun was being attacked by a hungry dragon. And the only thing to do was to scream and shout and bang gongs and beat drums and make as much noise as possible to scare the spook away. And of course, it always worked. And I would say Chinese drawings of eclipses were somewhat extravagant. In the last century, it was widely believed that a small planet, Vulcan, moved around the sun closer in than Mercury. And at the eclipse of 1878, the American astronomer, Watson, believed he'd actually seen it, but alas, all he saw was an ordinary star. And then, there was the eclipse of 1882. There appeared a bright comet near the sun, never seen before and never seen again. Much more recently, in the Second World War, a French party managed to slip through to the Pacific to see a total eclipse, but unfortunately made a slight mistake and went to the wrong island and missed totality. So, what to look out for? The diamond ring, then the prominences, masses of red, glowing gas rising from the sun's surface, and of course the corona, the sun's atmosphere, streaming out in all directions, a most marvelous sight. Photograph it by all means, but do remember, never look direct at the sun through any optical appliance unless it's completely eclipsed. That also applies to an SLR camera. At other times, either use a proper filter or else project the sun, as I'm doing here. And above all, please, don't use flash. Today, there's to be a full-scale rehearsal for everybody, not including the sun, of course. So let's see how some of the passengers and the would-be photographers are getting on. Well, Chris, what equipment have you got?
Well, I'll be using 2 cameras, both with tripods. For one camera, I'll have a 600mm mirror lens, f8, and for the other, a 200mm lens with a 2x converter, so making it 400.
What special preparations have you made?
Well, basically, just making sure that everything's in order, everything's set up. You've got films in your camera, you've got your lens cap off, that's essential. That's it, just making sure, go through the program, you know, what exposures you're going to take, because you haven't got time to think during the eclipse. You've only got time to get on with it.
Now, of course, we're on board ship. What about the ship's movement? Are you going to make compensation for that?
Well, yes, there'll be shorter exposure times for those, and so the ship's movement shouldn't really, the engines hopefully will be turned off, so the vibration will stop. But the movement, you just have to realign the cameras every so often, make sure you still have the eclipse in view.
The best way to point your telescope at the sun is to aim it in the general direction and then move it around until the shadow cast by the telescope is at its smallest. Then you know everything's properly lined up. One man who's seen the sun from a different perspective is astronomer-astronaut Dr. Ron Paris.
Well, of course, the sun is very bright in space, just like it is from the ground. The big difference is that when you observe the sun from the ground, of course, we see blue sky around it, whereas in space, we just see the jet black background of space around it. It's very unusual looking because of that.
What equipment will you be using?
I normally use a 500mm telephoto lens. This is a very old lens I've had for ages and ages. In fact, it was old when I got it, and this is an old Minolta single lens reflex camera. The 500mm telephoto gives you a size of the moon's disk that's about a quarter of the size of a 35mm frame, so it gives you plenty of room around it for the corona.
This time, are you looking for anything particular?
Oh, nothing in particular. I just will take a general series of pictures, and I'm just a tourist here like everyone else.
The official photographer is an eclipse expert. This will be George Keene's 9th successful eclipse. First of all, George, what equipment would you recommend?
Well, almost anything will get an image that will be interesting on the eclipse. Details, prominences, other key aspects of the corona, only obtained with a telescope and long lens that gives you a big enough image to see those details.
But can people take good photographs without expensive equipment?
Certainly can. Now, this camera is expensive. It's equipped specially for my telescope, but I've been working with other passengers today with very modest equipment and encouraging them to try it out. Many of the point-and-shoot cameras today have a bit of a zoom lens. They can change the focal length, usually with a motor drive. And that's quite useful. Push it out to the longest focal length and try your luck. You'll get something, I'm sure.
Well, what are the key things to look out for?
Well, other people's equipment on deck. The one most important thing is to make sure the film is in your camera and being taken up by the take-up roll. At the beginning of totality, the so-called diamond ring, when the last little bit of the sun peeks through a lunar mountain, a valley beside a mountain at the limb, the edge of the moon. A second thing are details in the corona, the pearly, glowing, whitish atmosphere of the sun, which we only see from Earth during totality. Those details are caused by the magnetic fields on the sun, and they shape and warp and twist the corona in ways that are very interesting. Most brilliant on the edge of the sun are the red hydrogen prominences. These are not always seen, and we're at a time of sunspot minimum right now, and that means the sun is not as active as it might be. Therefore, the chance of seeing a big prominence tomorrow is fairly low. But in other eclipses, they have been outstanding, and just oohs and ahs from the crowd as these red flames are seen poking out from the limb of the sun.